welcome to today's Digital Lunchbox. We are going to be talking about tackling your digital marketing strategy for 2021. So the idea of planning for 2021, I think, is pretty daunting for everyone. You know, the reality is that we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and the factors that can influence businesses are still going to continue to evolve through 2021. But I know we're all ready to get through 2020. We're ready to just have this year be behind us. So with that, let's talk about marketing plans. So I'm going to start with you, Seth. How can you differentiate between business goals and marketing goals?
Well, I think they have to be interrelated, right? If the business wants to enter into a new category or improve in a certain area, it really has to team up with the marketing department, and of course, vice versa. You know, the marketing department can't just go off and do its own thing. They have to really be tightly aligned. So they're very interconnected, I would say. Tyler, anything else on that?
Yeah, from my perspective, business goals are up here,
Mm,
and marketing goals are just like one step below that.
yeah.
So, for instance, to kind of riff off what you're talking about, Seth, if we're trying to, our business goal is to break into this new area, and within this area, we want to boost our revenue by X percent. The from the top down, the marketing goals are almost going to seem a bit tactical from that perspective. At the marketing level, then right below that, we're going to say, okay, we're going to expand our digital advertising within this area, and we're hoping to, our target is to get this percentage of conversion rate top of funnel, and build that up to X percentage or X number of people by this date, which then we'll be working on optimizing funnel mid funnel, and then taking a look back and saying, okay, later in the year, how do we optimize top of funnel a little bit more? So strategy is kind of that nesting doll thing where top level feels strategy, and then that next level feels tactical. But then if you're looking up for marketing, that those things become strategy, and underneath that, each of them have tactics in and of themselves that are going to help us to reach those. So it's really a perspective thing for me, but absolutely, if we're not interrelated and we're all not working toward the same goal, we're definitely not getting where we're going.
Yep, absolutely.
Kind of expanding on that further, because everything is so interrelated. Who then should be involved in setting these strategic marketing objectives?
Well, personally, I think everyone should be. Everyone within that marketing organization is going to have a different perspective and ideas to bring to the table. That doesn't necessarily mean that all of those ideas are going to be great, but in my experience, you'd be surprised where some of the brightest gems can come from in gathering ideas, and really, kind of that folks on the ground, they know really best what's working and what's not. I mean, at the upper level, executives hopefully have the right kinds of data to be making informed decisions. But at that tactical level, or what's really resonating, that's really going to be the people who are closest to your end user. And that's usually the folks who are creating that content. They're going to know best. They're in the platforms every day. They're going to see new opportunities that execs just won't.
Yeah, and while execs like to operate with quantitative data, the people who are actually talking to customers or end users, some of that, while we would love it to be quantitative, is qualitative. And when we're thinking about how we tell our story or our messaging or the psychology behind what messaging resonates, it's helpful to have those qualitative stories and that face-to-face experience that these people have. And then, of course, like Tyler says, not everyone is going to get their idea inserted into the strategy, right? It's a brainstorming session. More heads are better than one, but ultimately leadership has to filter out, and that's the job of leadership, is to be a leader and say this one's not going to cut it, or this one will, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I'm going to improvise a real quick question here. Seth, as a leader in that role, how do you make that decision? Like, you've created a really open culture here at 08. And we just got done with our strategy planning sessions where we went through this very exercise, and everyone threw their ideas into the blender. How do you, in that leadership role, pick the right ones and make sure that they align?
Right. Of course, data is great if we have it, if we can justify a decision by data. But if we don't, if it's a bit more qualitative, like, I've been saying, it comes down to intuition and making a decision. And, just like someone coming on Shark Tank who has an idea, how do those people make the decision? Well, it's based on their experience as a leader in this particular business and knowing, having a little bit longer term view of this particular business in this particular niche. So long story short, I'd say it's mostly intuitive.
Trust your gut.
Yeah.
Trust your gut. Yep.
Well, and like I always see you running A/B tests.
Yes.
To try and validate that gut and
Absolutely.
gather the data where you can, which is a really, like, can you
Yes.
just talk a little bit about why you're such a fan of that model?
Yeah, I should have picked up on that leading question. Yeah, I am always happy to be wrong. That's the thing. Of course, intuition is important, but I am wrong, and I'm very happy to be wrong, because then that means I know when I'm right, or I know how to get to right. And A/B testing and experimentation is the way to find out how to be right much more of the time than not. So using data to back your decisions, doing a test of this messaging or this layout or whatever it is, it's so important, because best practices are so often wrong and your intuition can be wrong. It's always better to back it up with data whenever you can.
Yeah, and so, like, I guess the question some may be having then is, well, how does A/B testing tie back to strategic goals? And for us, that can be something as central as our core tagline. Yep. And how a pivot there to really recenter ourselves, or reframe ourselves in the perspective of the consumer, is that has huge strategic implementations leading into 2021. And so Seth has been running some A/B tests and doing some ideation on some of those really core pieces to the brand, to help reinforce the ideas that we have and see if this is indeed the right direction.
Exactly. Yep. Good point.
Very agile.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Hadley. Back to you.
No worries, I love it. So before this strategic brainstorming session, where we do have everyone and we do have the leader there to filter things out, should anything be completed before that? What do you think, Seth?
Yeah, every company runs differently. I can speak to personal preferences and ways we run things around here. You want to do some research on your market and industry trends, but also have some time for inspiration. Make some time for inspiration. Just reading, listening to lots of audiobooks, podcasts, recent topics that folks are talking about in your industry, and then put together a productive agenda. So our agenda consists of the best and worst news of the year, an inspirational quote to get people thinking, and then you get into the nitty gritty, like the state of the market, our capabilities, what we should stop, start, keep doing, our identity and differentiation. And then we get into some things from the book Scaling Up, which I recommend you read if you haven't, like strategic things. The 7 strata of strategy is what they call it. And then we get into accountability, processes, and OKRs. And then have a Rockefeller habits checklist that we review. So long-winded, it takes us 2 days on average, but it's so important. And like Tyler was saying, this doesn't have to be a one and done thing. We are agile enough where we'll take some of those components from the strategic meeting and riff on them a little bit, maybe next month or a quarter from now. It probably shouldn't, in today's world, be a one and done thing. You should keep assessing and being agile and improving throughout the year.
So you mentioned OKRs. Can you talk to me more about that? Because we've been trying to encourage not only our organization, but all of our clients to really focus in on OKRs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are just specific, measurable goals that either a team or a person is held accountable to. So they generally have a duration. So maybe increase readership on a specific set or topic area of blog articles, for example, is just one little thing. But it's a very concrete, smaller, bite-sized task that is trackable and accountable to a person, rather than having just a large overarching goal like let's sell more widgets or let's increase XYZ metric. It helps people on the team know exactly how they are expected to get to this larger goal, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And speaking of goals, what types of marketing goals should an organization set? Are there any guidelines that should be followed for that? What do you think, Tyler?
Well, so OKRs are kind of like a mini version of SMART goals, and that's I think my answer here is we should be setting SMART goals for our marketing organizations. Yes. Really, I see a lot of goals that are more lofty ideas than they are things that can actually be achieved, number one. And number two, the question becomes like, okay, how would we ever begin to measure that? And once you start digging into that, often organizations won't have the infrastructure in place to be able to do that. So when, kind of tying back into that earlier idea of expanding into a new territory, really each of those examples that we set, there's a clear, measurable result, and it's realistic. We set timelines, so by the end of Q1 or whatever, so that we have those goalposts to work toward. Especially with all of the crazy that's going on, and it just seems like that level continues to grow each month. But hopefully that's going to reset somewhere. But the crazy, just you can get caught up in it so easily, and those SMART goals and the kind of those tiered or structured OKRs that support them on an individual level really help to keep everyone focused and aligned. Without those, I don't know how an organization would make headway these days. Otherwise you're just constantly going to be in the fire extinguisher mode. Whatever's hottest and brightest, we're running toward to try and put out. And you might make incidental progress, but it's definitely not going to be focused. And I would bet my bottom dollar it's going to come up pretty short from where you're trying to actually get. And then looping back to the idea of measurement. So this is where, whenever we start an engagement, the very first thing that we're talking about, KPIs and the measurement infrastructure that's going to be required to support those, so that we know that our clients have the infrastructure and the tooling in place to be able to measure any of those SMART goals that they're going to set moving forward. So if your organization hasn't done that yet, or you're not quite sure where you're at with your tool set in your MarTech stack and its ability to measure these goals, definitely start there and make that its own SMART goal. For Q1 2021, we're going to audit this, and we're going to establish and align that tech stack to be able to successfully measure for our SMART goals looking into later 2021.
So we keep saying the term SMART goals. What does SMART actually stand for? And what is the best way to kind of assess progress and just how far you're getting to accomplish these goals?
So that's specific, measurable, something realistic, and time bound. What's
achievable?
The A? Achievable, yeah. And so, it's right there in my notes.
Yeah.
And so really, I love these, and I work on these personally, beyond like just intention setting every day. to really help stay focused. And again, just make sure that where we're trying to get is clear. We know, and we know that, that's actually realistic. So that means taking a look at past performance and saying, with that in mind, is this 30% gain achievable? Is this relevant still? Because if it's not achievable and if it's not relevant, given the direction of the market and your business, you're just setting yourself up for failure, and you're funneling a lot of energy into something that's just you're not gonna realize the return.
Yep.
So going back to how to assess progress, Seth, what's the best way to approach that?
Well, so Tyler is mentioning SMART goals. You should probably track them, right? Put them in a spreadsheet or a dashboard, whatever works for you, and then have periodic, consistent check-ins to review and learn from the progress or lack thereof, or any data that is, if they're measurable indeed, then you should have data backing them up. So that's your time to kind of be agile, and maybe we need to pivot or do something a little different if our progress is not aligning with our SMART goals. We personally follow the traction process at our company. There's a book called Traction that you can read and find out about, but any kind of organizational operating system that's formalized should have these periodic check-ins that's reviewing the data and learning from the data, and pivoting or reacting as necessary.
And one thing while we're talking about measurement, that especially in marketing organizations, I see that just leaves me scratching my head, is, well, our goal is qualitative. It's a feeling. We can't measure that. You can.
Yeah.
And so if you aren't familiar with how to, measure qualitative aspects to your projects, get out there, Google it, do some research, get in touch with someone who knows how to do that, so that you and your organization can be gathering that data, and know whether or not you're making the changes to the user experience. Especially, we see those pop up in user experience related goals. There are standard usability scales and things out there beyond just your standard 5 or 7 point Likert that can help us to measure in meaningful ways the qualitative aspects of the usability of our sites, or even the approachability of our branding efforts.
Yeah. And, of course, at the strategic meeting, sure, there's room to be aspirational and have, poetic, emotional goals that maybe aren't so measurable. That's fine. But beneath those, you can still set SMART goals and OKRs and these things.
Yep.
Right. We don't
Absolutely.
want to be too dry, but, let's back up these beautiful things with measurable things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we know that 2020 threw us many curveballs, and we're going into 2021, hopefully optimistic, and who knows what it's going to hold. But in your opinion, Seth and Tyler, is there anything else that an organization should consider before going into this new year?
Well, I guess I already talked about if you don't have that underlying infrastructure to measure these things, start there. Assuming that you do have that, I think this is going to be a really great year to really step back and say, what are the things that have worked for us this year? Why have those worked? And how you see those potentially playing out in a hopeful post-pandemic world. I would guess that those things that you're realizing a high ROI on now are going to be things that are going to continue to be successful for you moving forward, because a lot of the underlying behaviors are going to have shifted. This hasn't been the 2 to 3 week thing that we were all hoping it was going to be. We're going to be pressing on a year here. That's a lot of new habits that have formed. And so really take a step back and focus on that ROI, where you've seen it, where you maybe haven't, and consider seriously dropping out some of those things where you're just not seeing that return. I know maybe that sounds goofy, but
no, it makes sense.
It's been a long time. And so I think businesses, just like we have, really need to just step back and ask some of those tough questions.
Mm-hmm. And I would add, things are going to change rapidly again, once we have a vaccine, and they're not going to be totally the same, and we don't know everything just yet. So back to the topic of experimentation, be agile, adapt, test, experiment, A/B testing. There's user experience testing. You can get panels of people to give impressions of things, assets, copy, messaging. There's a new copy testing service out from our friends at CXL. Just get data and in any way you can on anything that you're doing, and try different variations. Experiment, learn, be as agile as you can in the coming year. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Always have a plan B and maybe a plan C and a plan D.
Yeah.
When you brought us.
Yep.
Yeah, did you have anything to add?
Well, yeah, I think one thing that we've really seen success with this year is we've taken a look at some of those partnerships that we have with our other organizations. And we've seen this outside of our sphere. We've seen a lot of coffee shops and things doing collabs to help bridge the gap where retail spaces or others, restaurants have potentially suffered. And so 2021, I think, is going to be a great year to take a look at and realign with your partners. If you don't have solid partners, just like you've needed really solid friends and family to get through this quarantine, having solid business partners, internally, but hopefully externally too, to help play off of each other's strengths and reinforce where there are weaknesses can really be beneficial, especially in trying times.
I love that. Raising water raises all ships, right?
Yep.
Well, that was great. Okay, well, thank you both so much. And if anyone has any questions on how we approach our 2021 strategic planning, and if we can do anything to help you, we're happy to help. So feel free to reach out, and we are back here on the first Tuesday of every month for DLBs. Thanks for joining.